I had always known my aunt as a quiet presence in the background of my life, never loud or intrusive, but always there when I needed her. Growing up, she wasn't the type to make grand gestures or shower me with attention, but somehow her support felt steady and unshakable. She had this way of showing care in the smallest details, like remembering my favorite tea, or leaving a book on my desk when she visited. It wasn't flashy, but it was genuine. And in a world that often felt chaotic, her quiet kindness was a refuge. Lately, I've been feeling overwhelmed in ways I hadn't before. The pressures of work and the endless to-do lists that seemed to multiply overnight had started to wear me down. I found myself waking up with a tight knot in my stomach, dreading the day ahead. Even the things I once enjoyed felt muted by fatigue and stress. It was like carrying a weight I couldn't quite set down. I wasn't sure how to ask for help or even if I should. It felt easier to just push through and hope the storm would pass. But it never did. The days bled into each other, and I was left feeling exhausted, fragile, and a little lost. Throughout all this, my aunt remained a quiet anchor. She never asked too many questions or offered unsolicited advice. Instead, she had this habit of showing up with little acts of kindness that sometimes went unnoticed but meant the world once I recognized them. Like the time she dropped off a small jar of honey, knowing I liked it in my tea but never said so out loud. Or when she would leave a handwritten note tucked inside a book she lent me. The words simple but thoughtful, like a gentle reminder that I wasn't alone. Her gestures were never loud or demanding of attention, but they grounded me in a way that nothing else seemed to. It wasn't that she tried to fix things. I think she knew some things couldn't be fixed with words or quick solutions. Instead, she created a space where I could just be flawed, tired, and all. She had this calmness about her that was almost contagious. When she was around, the noise in my head seemed to quiet down just enough to breathe a little easier. I realized that what I needed wasn't a grand rescue, but someone who simply understood and accepted me as I was. And in all the years I had known her, my aunt had been that person, quietly weaving a safety net beneath me with her small, thoughtful gestures. Looking back, I could see how much those small moments had added up. They were like tiny lifelines thrown across the overwhelming sea of my days, tethering me to something steady and true. It was easy to overlook them in the rush of everything else, but now, in the thick of my struggles, I understood their significance. Her kindness wasn't about fixing me or making my problems disappear. It was about reminding me I mattered, even when I felt invisible to the world. There was a certain rhythm to her kindness, a softness that didn't demand anything in return. It was in the way she would listen without interrupting when I spoke about my stress, never rushing to fill the silence but letting it breathe. It was in the way her smile held no judgment, only warmth and acceptance. These little things created a quiet sanctuary where I could drop my guard and simply be myself without the pressure to perform or pretend. Sometimes I caught myself wondering how she managed to stay so calm and gentle when life was undoubtedly complex for her too. She carried her own burdens and challenges, yet she never let them overshadow the care she offered me. Maybe it was because she understood what it meant to struggle quietly, or maybe her strength was rooted in a deep well of empathy. Whatever it was, I was grateful beyond words. As the days passed and my stress deepened, I found myself increasingly drawn to her presence. It wasn't about seeking answers or solutions, but about finding a place where I could feel safe to unravel some of the tension knotted inside me. I realized that her subtle, consistent support was exactly what I needed, even if I hadn't known it before. She was like a steady flame in a dark room, offering light without overwhelming heat. I remembered the countless times she'd reached out through small acts, dropping by with a cup of tea on a random afternoon, sending a quick text just to check in, or leaving a cozy blanket folded neatly on my bed when she visited. These gestures weren't extravagant, but they carried a profound message. You are seen, you are cared for, and you are not alone. In the midst of my silent battles, these reminders settled into my heart like a balm. It struck me that her kindness was woven into the fabric of everyday life, not reserved for special occasions or dramatic moments. It was the way she noticed the little things, the way my hands trembled when I was anxious, or how I often forgot to eat when stressed, and responded with gentle care. She never made a fuss or drew attention to it. She just quietly met me where I was, offering what she could in a way that felt natural and sincere. I realized that her love wasn't loud or flashy, but it was steady and enduring. It was the kind of love that didn't ask for recognition or repayment, but simply existed as a quiet, unwavering force. In a world that often felt overwhelming and impersonal, her presence was a reminder that kindness could be simple, subtle, and deeply powerful. As I sat with these thoughts, I felt a growing sense of gratitude for my aunt's presence in my life. She had always been there, a steady, gentle light through the ups and downs. And even when I didn't know how to say it, I knew that beneath the surface of my exhaustion and stress, her quiet support was a lifeline I could hold on to. The weight of my struggles hadn't lifted, but somehow, knowing she was there made the burden feel a little less heavy. It was a reminder that sometimes, the most profound comfort comes not from grand gestures or dramatic rescues, but from the quiet, consistent presence of someone who cares deeply and shows it in the smallest, most meaningful ways. That afternoon, the sky had been a dull gray all day, with rain tapping softly against the windows like a lullaby of exhaustion. I had just finished a grueling day that seemed to stretch endlessly, each task piling on top of the last until my mind felt frayed and my body heavy. The kind of day where even the smallest effort demanded more than I thought I could give. I remember stepping outside for a moment, the cold drizzle settling on my coat, and feeling an overwhelming urge to escape the noise and pressure that had clung to me like a second skin. I found myself driving to my aunt's house without a clear plan, just knowing that somewhere in her quiet presence, I might find a reprieve. Her home was nestled on a quiet street, framed by tall trees that swayed gently in the rain. The familiar sight of her garden, damp and glistening, was a small comfort as I pulled up to the driveway. I hesitated for a moment before stepping inside, the warmth and soft light immediately wrapping around me like a gentle hug. The house smelled faintly of lavender and old books, a scent that always made me feel like I was somewhere safe. My aunt appeared from the kitchen doorway, her silver hair tucked neatly behind her ears, and greeted me with that same gentle smile that never failed to ease the tightness in my chest. She didn't ask how my day had been right away or press me for details. Instead, she simply opened her arms, inviting me in with a warmth that felt like a shelter from the storm outside. Her eyes held a quiet understanding as she stepped forward, her hands reaching out to take my coat. It was a small gesture, but it carried a weight of care and attention that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't all day. Without a word, she guided me toward the living room, where the soft glow of a lamp cast a cozy light across the worn armchairs and the shelves lined with well-loved books. The rain continued its steady rhythm on the roof, a soothing backdrop to the stillness that settled between us. I sank into one of the armchairs, the fabric worn smooth by years of use, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My aunt moved around the room with practiced ease, her presence steady and reassuring. She didn't try to fill the silence or push me to talk. Instead, she simply made space for me to arrive as I was, tired, overwhelmed, and in need of quiet. When she returned, she carried a steaming cup of tea, the aroma of chamomile and honey rising gently between us. She handed it to me with a simple nod, a silent invitation to relax. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, feeling the heat seep into my fingers and calm the trembling beneath my skin. She then reached for a soft blanket folded neatly over the back of the sofa and draped it over my shoulders, the fabric cool at first but quickly warming with my body heat. It was such a simple act, just tea and a blanket, but it struck me how much comfort could be found in these small things. The heaviness I'd been carrying all day began to lift, if only a little, as I settled deeper into the chair. My aunt sat nearby, not too close but close enough that her presence felt like a steady anchor. She picked up a book from the table and flipped through it absent-mindedly, glancing at me now and then with a softness in her eyes that invited me to speak if I wanted. For a long moment I said nothing. The rain continued its gentle tapping, and the quiet between us was not empty but full of unspoken understanding. Then slowly I found myself beginning to share the weight I'd been carrying. The stress at work that felt relentless, the anxiety that crept in during quiet moments, the exhaustion that made even simple decisions feel monumental. My words came hesitantly at first, like dipping a toe into cold water, but her steady gaze encouraged me to keep going. She listened without interruption, her expression calm and compassionate. There was no rush to fix things or offer advice, just a patient presence that made it safe to be vulnerable. I realized how rare that was, to have someone truly listen without judgment or the urge to fill the silence with solutions. Her gentle nods and the occasional soft sigh let me know she understood, that my feelings were valid even if I couldn't always explain them clearly. As I spoke, the tightness in my chest began to loosen, the knot of stress unraveling thread by thread. My aunt's quiet support created a space where I could breathe and let go, if only for a little while. It was as if her calmness seeped into me, washing away some of the tension that had built up over weeks and months. The warmth of the tea, the softness of the blanket, and her gentle presence combined to form a sanctuary where I could rest. At one point, I glanced out the window to see the rain slowing, the clouds parting just enough to let a pale shaft of light through. It felt symbolic, as if the day's gloom was beginning to lift, mirrored by the quiet comfort inside. My aunt smiled softly, as if she sensed the shift too, and reached over to gently squeeze my hand. The simple touch was grounding, a reminder that I was not alone in this. We didn't rush to fill the space with more words. Instead, we sat together in companionable silence, the kind that only comes with deep understanding. The house around us felt warm and safe, each creak and whisper of the rain a reminder that some things, like this quiet refuge, endured even on the hardest days. Eventually, my aunt reached over to adjust the blanket around my shoulders, her fingers brushing lightly against my skin. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes, a promise of care, a steady presence to lean on. I realized then that this was what I'd been craving all along. A place to lay down the weight, to be held gently by someone who understood without needing me to explain everything. The afternoon light shifted slowly, casting soft shadows across the room as the rain finally tapered off. Outside, the world looked washed clean, the leaves glistening with fresh droplets. Inside, the quiet comfort of my aunt's home wrapped around me like a balm, soothing the ache of a day that had felt too much. I stayed there a little longer, sipping the now lukewarm tea, feeling the steady rhythm of calm settle into my bones. My aunt didn't press me to talk more or to fix what was broken. She simply offered a sanctuary where I could be present with my feelings, safe and supported. That rainy afternoon, in that quiet house filled with soft light and gentle care, I found a moment of peace I hadn't known I needed. It wasn't a cure or a solution, just a pause, a breath, and the quiet reassurance that sometimes, the most healing thing is simply to be held in kindness. The warmth from the tea still lingered in my hands as I settled deeper into the soft armchair, the blanket draped around my shoulders like a gentle shield against the cold that seemed to seep into my bones. The room felt cocooned in a quiet calm, the soft hum of the rain now a distant memory fading into silence. My aunt sat nearby, her posture relaxed, eyes meeting mine with a calmness that seemed to say, "Take your time. I'm here." She didn't rush me into conversation, and I wasn't quite ready to speak at first. The weight of the day still pressed against my chest, the tangled thoughts swirling just beneath the surface. But beneath her steady gaze, I felt a subtle invitation to lower my defenses, to share bits of the turmoil I'd been carrying without fear of judgment or interruption. Slowly I began to speak. Not in a flood or a rush, but in small, hesitant pieces. I told her about the mounting pressures at work, the endless deadlines that blurred together, the expectations that felt impossible to meet, and the gnawing anxiety that tightened my throat each morning. I spoke of the fatigue that wasn't just physical but seemed to stretch into my very soul, making even simple tasks feel like mountains to climb. My words stumbled over themselves, sometimes halting, but she listened without a word of impatience, her eyes soft and attentive. She never pushed for more or tried to fill the silence with reassurances that might have felt hollow. Instead, her quiet presence held space for my story, like a steady shore waiting for the tide to recede. It was in the way she nodded gently, the slight tilt of her head, and the occasional squeeze of my hand that I sensed her empathy, deep and genuine, offering comfort without the need for solutions. As I spoke, I realized how much I'd bottled up over the past weeks. The fear of burdening others, the weight of expectations I placed on myself, and the quiet loneliness that crept in when I felt too tired to reach out. My aunt's patient listening was a balm, allowing those feelings to surface without shame or dismissal. I felt a softness growing inside me, a crack in the armor I'd worn so tightly. She reached for the cup of tea beside her, taking a slow sip before speaking in her calm, steady voice. "It sounds like you've been carrying a heavy load," she said gently. "It's okay to feel overwhelmed. Sometimes just saying it out loud can be the first step toward relief." Her words weren't a fix, but they held truth and permission, an acknowledgement that my feelings were real and valid. Encouraged by her response, I found myself opening up more, sharing not just the stress but the fears beneath it. The worry that I wasn't enough, that I might falter or disappoint those I cared about. The vulnerability felt raw, but with her there it didn't feel like a weakness. Instead, it felt like a bridge, connecting me to someone who understood without needing me to explain everything perfectly. The room seemed to breathe with us as we sat together, the quiet air filled with a gentle understanding. My aunt's presence was steady, like the calm eye of a storm, grounding me when my thoughts threatened to spiral. I realized that in this space I didn't have to be anything other than myself. Imperfect, tired, and in need of kindness. She shifted slightly, pulling the blanket tighter around my shoulders, and gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "You don't have to face this alone," she said softly. "Sometimes it helps just to pause and let yourself be held." Her words wrapped around me like the blanket, a warmth that reached beyond the physical. We sat in silence for a moment, the kind that felt full rather than empty, before she suggested something simple. "Would you like to hear a story? Something from when I was going through a difficult time." The invitation was gentle, and I nodded, curious to hear her voice beyond the comfort of silence. She began to share a story from her younger days, a time when life had been challenging in ways that echoed my own struggles. Her voice was steady but filled with emotion, recounting moments of doubt, fear, and uncertainty. Yet, woven through her story were threads of resilience and hope. The way she found light in small victories, and the importance of leaning on others when the burden felt too great. Listening to her, I felt a shift inside me. Her story wasn't just a tale of hardship. It was a reminder that difficult times were part of life's fabric, but didn't define the whole. The way she spoke about accepting help and finding strength in vulnerability gave me a quiet courage I hadn't known I needed. After she finished, we stayed nestled in the warmth of the room, the soft glow of the lamp casting gentle shadows. Feeling a little lighter, I reached for an old photo album resting on the coffee table nearby. My aunt smiled and leaned over to open it with me. As we flipped through the pages, pictures of family gatherings, holiday celebrations, and candid moments filled the space between us. Each photograph sparked a memory, and soon we were laughing softly at shared stories, the antics of cousins long grown, the mishaps at holiday dinners, and the quiet joys that had stitched our family together over the years. The laughter was a gentle release, a balm that softened the edges of my worries and brought a renewed sense of connection. In those moments, I felt the invisible thread of belonging that had always tied me to my aunt and our family. The photos were more than just images. They were reminders of history, love, and the enduring bonds that carried us through both joy and hardship. With each turn of the page, the heaviness inside me seemed to lift a little more, replaced by a quiet comfort rooted in shared experience. The room around us seemed to hold its breath, as if honoring the significance of this simple time together. There was no rush, no pressure. Just two people sharing space, stories, and a moment of peace amid the chaos of life. The blanket still draped over my shoulders, the tea long finished, but the warmth lingered, not just in my body but in my heart. I looked at my aunt then, really looked, and saw not just the quiet figure who had always been there, but a source of strength and kindness that I could lean on. The small gestures, the tea, the blanket, the listening, had blossomed into something much deeper. They had created a space where I could breathe, open up, and begin to heal. In that quiet afternoon, wrapped in the simplicity of her care, I realized that sometimes the greatest comfort comes not from grand solutions, but from the gentle presence of someone who truly listens and understands. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, connection and kindness could light the way forward, one small gesture at a time. As the soft light from the lamp spilled across the room, my aunt's story lingered in the air like a gentle melody, comforting and familiar. Her voice had carried me through the shadows of her past, moments marked by uncertainty and struggle, yet threaded with resilience and quiet strength. The way she spoke about those times wasn't just a recollection. It was an offering, a bridge connecting her experiences to mine, as if to say, "You are not alone in this." After a pause, she reached for the photo album again, gently turning the pages as the images sparked memories we both held dear. The photographs were faded around the edges, but each one captured a moment rich with laughter, love, and sometimes a hint of mischief. We lingered on a picture of a family picnic, sun-dappled smiles frozen in time, and another from a holiday gathering where a cousin had accidentally spilled punch all over the tablecloth. The laughter that bubbled up between us was soft but genuine, A shared release from the tension of the day. It reminded me that even amid life's challenges, there were threads of joy and connection that wove us together. My aunt's eyes twinkled as she recounted stories behind each photo, her voice light and warm, transforming the room into a tapestry of memories that bridged past and present. With each story, I felt the heaviness inside me ease a little more. The simple act of looking through these snapshots of family life created a sense of belonging I hadn't realized I was craving. It was as though the laughter and love captured in those moments reached across time to remind me that I was part of something larger, something enduring. At one point, my aunt paused on a photo of herself as a young woman, standing beside her own mother in the garden, both of them smiling despite the worn edges of the image. She looked at me then, her expression softening. "That was a difficult time for us," she said quietly. "But those moments of togetherness kept us going. Sometimes it's not the big things that carry us through, but the small acts of kindness and the people who stand beside us." Her words settled into the quiet space between us, echoing the message of her earlier story. I realized that what I'd been experiencing wasn't a solitary battle, but part of a larger human experience. One marked by hardship, but also by the enduring power of connection and care. Inspired by her openness, I shared a few memories of my own, stories from childhood and adolescence that I hadn't thought about in years. We talked about family traditions, the little quirks that made our gatherings unique, and the moments when laughter had broken through even the toughest times. It was a conversation that felt both intimate and expansive, weaving the threads of our shared history into a comforting tapestry. As the evening deepened, my aunt suggested we move to the kitchen to prepare a light snack. The familiar clinking of dishes and the soft hum of the kettle filled the space with a homey warmth. Together we peeled apples for a simple crumble, the scent of cinnamon and baking filling the air. The act of cooking side by side was soothing in its rhythm, a quiet ritual that grounded us in the present. While the crumble baked, we returned to the living room, the room now bathed in the golden glow of the table lamp. My aunt pulled a well-worn book from the shelf and opened it to a marked page. She read aloud a passage that spoke of hope and perseverance, her voice steady and comforting. The words wrapped around me like a warm blanket, reinforcing the sense of calm and reassurance that had blossomed throughout the afternoon. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming gratitude for the simple yet profound ways my aunt nurtured our bond. It wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic declarations of love. It was about these shared moments, the stories, the laughter, the quiet understanding, that built a foundation strong enough to hold us through the storms. When the crumble was ready, we settled back into the living room with warm plates and cups of tea. The sweetness of the dessert and the softness of the tea mirrored the gentle unfolding of our connection. We talked about hopes and fears, about the future and the past, weaving our stories together in a tapestry of trust. As the night wore on, I felt the weight of my worries lessen, replaced by a quiet strength that came from knowing I had someone who understood and cared deeply. My aunt's kindness had blossomed into a meaningful emotional encounter, one that fortified the fragile parts of me and reminded me of the power of family and love. The gentle rhythm of our evening together was a balm to my spirit, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, connection and compassion could light the way forward. And as we finally prepared to call it a night, I carried with me a renewed sense of belonging and hope, an invisible thread woven from the small, tender moments shared with my aunt, binding us together across time and trials. As the evening drew to a close, the comforting quiet of my aunt's home wrapped around us like a soft blanket, warm and reassuring. We had shared stories, laughter, and moments of silence that felt as meaningful as words. The gentle flicker of the lamp cast shadows that danced lightly on the walls, echoing the quiet peace that had settled deep inside me. When it was time to leave, I felt a reluctance to step back into the cold outside world, but my aunt's next gesture stayed with me, a tender reminder of the care that had carried me through the day. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small folded piece of paper, her hand steady and deliberate. "I wrote this for you," she said softly, pressing the note into my palm. Her eyes met mine with a quiet kindness that made my heart flutter unexpectedly. The note wasn't long. A few heartfelt words about strength, hope, and the importance of taking things one step at a time. It was as if she had distilled all the warmth and understanding of the evening into those simple lines, a tangible token of her support. I unfolded the paper carefully, feeling the weight of her care in the delicate handwriting. It wasn't just a note. It was a lifeline. A reminder that I wasn't alone even when the days felt overwhelmingly dark. The words echoed in my mind as I tucked the note into my jacket pocket, a secret source of comfort I could carry with me. She also handed me a small book. A collection of poems she said had helped her through difficult times. The cover was worn, the pages soft from years of being read and reread. I traced the title with my fingers, feeling a connection not just to the book, but to the generations of wisdom and solace it held. It was more than a gift. It was an invitation to find peace in words, to seek out light in moments of shadow. I thanked her, my voice thick with emotion, struggling to find the right words to express the depth of my gratitude. She simply smiled, her eyes sparkling with understanding. "Remember, it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to take time for yourself," she said gently. "You're stronger than you realize." Walking out into the cool night air, the world felt different somehow, less heavy, less daunting. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the soft glow of the streetlights. I pulled my coat tighter around me, clutching the note and the book close to my heart. It was a small gesture, but it carried a profound message. I mattered, and I was never truly alone. As I made my way home, I found myself reflecting on the quiet moments of the evening. The shared stories, the laughter, the gentle listening, and the simple acts of kindness that had woven together to create a tapestry of support and love. It wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic changes. It was about the steady presence of someone who cared deeply and showed it in ways that felt both genuine and enduring. That night, as I lay in bed, I pulled the note from my pocket and read it once more by the soft glow of my bedside lamp. The words were a balm to my weary soul, a beacon of hope shining through the fog of stress and fatigue. I realized then that the strength I needed wasn't a fleeting burst of courage, but a quiet, steady flame kindled by moments of connection and care. In the days that followed, I carried the warmth of that evening with me, letting it seep into the corners of my life that had felt cold and empty. The note and the book became symbols of resilience, reminders that even in the hardest times, kindness and understanding could light the way forward. I found myself reaching out more, not just to my aunt but to others in my life, sharing pieces of my story and accepting support in return. The simple gestures she had shown me, the tea, the blanket, the listening ear, and the handwritten note, taught me that love doesn't always need to be spoken loudly to be deeply felt. In those quiet exchanges, I discovered a newfound appreciation for the small moments that build connections and heal wounds. I realized that the bonds we share with those who care for us are the threads that hold us together, weaving strength and hope into the fabric of our lives. Looking back on that rainy afternoon and the evenings that followed, I understood that my aunt's kindness had been a gift far greater than I had initially realized. It wasn't just about easing a difficult day. It was about reminding me of my own resilience, the power of vulnerability, and the unspoken promise that no matter how heavy the burden, there is always someone willing to help carry it. That simple note, that worn book, and the quiet moments we shared became a beacon of light in my life, a testament to the enduring power of love, presence, and the small, thoughtful gestures that can transform even the darkest days into something hopeful and whole. If you loved the story, like the video and subscribe.